Hello, welcome to day 2 of Museum Week, which is all about behind the scenes. One of my favorite things as Director of Education here at the National Quilt Museum is our Children's Quilt Camp, which we host every summer. This is for ages 7 to 17, and we have 3 different skill level sessions. So we have our beginner camp, where kids are just learning about the art of quilt making. They're maybe sewing for the very first time, learning how to sew straight seams, how to press and iron their pieces, and they go home with a finished piece that they've created. Our intermediate camp are for slightly older youth who've done the beginner sessions a few times, and intermediate camp, we start teaching them how to use the rotary cutters, how to accurately measure and cut their own fabrics, and then they actually machine quilt and bind their quilts as well. The advanced campers have been most of the time all the way through beginner and intermediate camps over the years, and by the time they get to 13 and up in advanced camp, they're learning techniques like curved piecing, paper piecing, following patterns, improv works, other types of quilt making to kind of expand and grow on those skills that they've learned as beginners and intermediates. We're very excited this month to see the return of Quilt Camp here at the Quilt Museum. And so for behind the scenes today, I'd like to give you a look inside one of the boxes that I keep in my educational stash. And this one is labeled Quilt Camp Samples. And something that maybe not everybody knows is that when we do camp, there's a project for each skill level. So that's 3 projects every summer. And it's fun for me to come up with those ideas, to find inspirations from online or designs and magazines, or just kind of ideas, concepts of what could be interesting for the campers to create. And I keep all of those samples here in this box, and that way I can revisit them, I can pull them out for other programs, I can revisit them. Some years I've repeated a project so that it was just really fun, and we tried to do it again and get more kids excited about quilt making. So I'm going to dig a little bit into this box, which will show houses at least the last 10 years of Quilt Camp projects. So it's about 30 or so different projects that we've used over the past, and kind of tell you a little bit about what inspired them or what got me excited to use those for each of the levels in Quilt Camp. This one right here on top is actually what I'm starting with for this summer. So I've kind of modified this project for our current camp coming up in June. So that's really exciting to see and kind of rehash some of these ideas and refine them a little bit. This was an intermediate camp project, and we give them background fabrics, we provide all the materials, but each of the campers then selected their own colors, all their different details, and learned how to cut all of those pieces in rectangles and assemble them all together. This project was a lot of fun too. This was an intermediate project as well. And this one was great, especially for people learning how to cut fabric for the first time. They started with a solid square of one color for their background, and then we just sliced into it one direction and inserted a strip and then cut it across the other way. And so a lot of the kids really paid attention to their color combinations and a lot of their details and how they cut into their blocks, but ending up with all those wonky cross pluses across their designs as well. Oh man, digging through these is kind of like unearthing a time capsule a little bit for me to go through. This was one of my very first beginner projects that we put together, kind of a classic snowball quilt block with a center printed design square. And then these outer corners were all done with solid fabrics. We had a whole lot of solid fabrics that year, so it was an easy way to use up some of our stash here at the museum, but also to kind of showcase those bold prints and let the kids have fun choosing all of those different colorful designs. Let's see what else is in here. This was also one of our beginner projects. Again, kind of solid squares that we just put borders on each of the sides. So that was, again, some good learning progress. The beginner camps, we actually pre-cut all of the pieces. I have some staff members and volunteers who helped me out with that, because it can be a lot of pieces when you have a lot of kids in camp. But that way they don't have to worry about cutting anything except maybe with scissors to trim off little scraggly threads and things like that. But they can choose from a wide variety of fabrics and combinations. Ooh, this was a good year. This was an intermediate camp project as well, these big asterisks, kind of supersized blocks to go around. So they had to cut a lot of different pieces for these. You can see each of my squares is different, But on the campers, they can choose what they want. So if they wanted to make all 4 the same, they can do that. If they want to create each one completely individual, that's also really great too. Sometimes the kids are thinking already to make it as a gift for a family member or a friend or someone that they know. So they're thinking about colors that that person would enjoy when they're making these projects. Okay. This is one of our advanced camp projects. It's a pretty recent one. This was a crosscut design that had been on Instagram, and I'd contacted the artist who had been responsible for this to see if it'd be okay that we could use it. And this was with Advanced Camp, so they were creating blocks, slicing in these inserts, and then chopping them up all over again. So this was a lot of cutting, and the campers, every time I told them, okay, now we're gonna cut it out again, they were like, are you sure? Are you positive to go with that? And so we put all these different pieces together. This was another version of that same project. And so just changing up the colors and the designs and the backdrops really changes the look of the quilt. And once they had all of their quilts done and they saw how it came together, they were just really impressed that they made this and that they were able to kind of follow along and create something really, really interesting with their designs. So that's fun to see too, what colors the campers create, what color combinations that I wouldn't think of, but something that they put together, and then that makes me think, oh, well, that would be really interesting. I wonder if I should try that in the next project that I make for myself or for a class here at the Quilt Museum. This was a popular beginner project, just kind of these confetti half square triangles. So they're learning how to make half square triangle blocks and just adding 2 borders to surround the triangle itself. This year, everybody had the same blue fabric as their backing. Again, we had a lot of that in the stash from our fabric donations, which is fantastic. But the kids then got to choose what fabrics they put in their half square triangles and what direction they ordered those triangles. So you can see there are lots of different possibilities. And some of the kids turned them all different directions. Some put them all in the same direction. So you really get a feel for the personality of the artist, even at those young ages, starting at 7 years old in their projects. And this was such a fun beginner project. I repeated it several years later, but this year we used green as the background. And that way it was just a little bit different, but still a lot of fun to create and to put together for the campers and for us to see what they would create from that. Let's see what else is in here. This, our advanced camp, like I said, we do all sorts of different projects. This year we did kind of these smaller mini quilts. We turned them into possibly pillows this year. Sometimes we leave them just as a mini quilt. Sometimes we turn them into larger pillow-sized pieces. This was a paper-pieced star, so they learned how to paper piece and how to put all that together. And then we turned the block on point. So we added these setting triangles, so they learned a little bit about the math of quilting and how that relates and how it comes together. And so while that took some time, it's a smaller finished project, they learned valuable skills and kind of challenged themselves to create these different paper piece patterns and put that together as well. There are so many good projects in here. Each one I think of maybe a camper or a specific design or color choice that they use that I was like, oh, I love this color. I would love to make one myself to put it all together. And that's really what I love about teaching kids to quilt, introducing them to quilting. Through camp, we take them into the galleries as well, so they get inspired by the quilts in the museum at the time, those exhibits and different details. And even sometimes taking projects like paper piecing or half square triangles or traditional quilt blocks like a bear paw, and they make these blocks. And then when we go into the galleries, we'll point out quilts that have those techniques or those skills or designs in them, so they can see how the quilters that are exhibited in the museum all started learning how to sew straight lines, learning how to press properly their seams, learning how to cut accurately, just like our intermediate campers, learning how to read a pattern for the advanced campers, or how to kind of challenge themselves and push beyond those basic skills to come together into their designs. But, this was another fun project. We had a lot of fabrics we just cut into strips. and we made quarter log cabin blocks. And you can see how scrappy and wild all of these fabrics are. So each of the campers went home. This was their finished size from beginner camp to go through. So again, we pre-cut those pieces, we lay them out on tables, we show the campers how to assemble their blocks and how many pieces they need, to go together to make each of the sides, all of those details. And then they get to use the sewing machines, and we teach them how to do that. And we've got volunteers to help them with the irons and with kind of matching up their edges and pinning their fabrics in place to keep those lines fairly straight as they go through. But it was really exciting to see how people turned their blocks in different directions throughout the quilt, how they matched up sometimes the fabrics from one side to the other to kind of get that color and that concept going through. A lot of times the kids surprise us with their designs or how they've tweaked a design, and that's okay. I want them to be creative. We want to encourage that artistic sense in each of the campers, in not only their fabric choice, but also sometimes in seeing the design, and maybe they turn the half square triangles a different direction. Maybe they flip-flop, one of the rectangular bars on the other side, and sometimes it's a mistake. And they learn how to make that into a design choice and how to continue that into their further project. Sometimes they're learning then they don't want it to be a design choice. They want to rip that out, so they're learning how to do that. And they're coming to understand this process of creating something and all the work and time that goes into creating these projects. Even when they're kind of a smaller size, this was an intermediate project, these Greek cross blocks. And they formed a secondary design here in the center with their half square triangles on the outside edges. So that was really something different for the campers as well, to kind of see how where you place your color can affect then the overall design, even when you aren't sure of that at the start. So each session we have the sample. I put that up on the wall. It's fun for me to play with those designs and those details. But then again, the kids, they get to choose any of the fabrics that we put out, and we have a lot of fabric. We've got a lot of colors, a lot of combinations that allow them to really explore. Sometimes those traditional quilt blocks are great for intermediate campers because they learn how to cut and piece accurately to a specific design. And then sometimes those advanced campers, we have a die cutter for Drunkard's Path curved piecing blocks. So I didn't make a full sample this year. I just had sample blocks in these colors, kind of in the alternate color to go through. And I used these sample block units with the campers to showcase when you turn them around, when you angle them in different directions, you get different shapes and different angles and curved pieces into your design. So they took that. And we had one do kind of a rainbow cascade of colors down the side that she planned out which color curve and corner was the right color in the next step. We had some turn them kind of into like cloud-like formations of their blocks coming together. You know how they pulled these into the half circles. We had some just doing them all every which way, and each of them, each project, every year turns out fabulous. The kids are so proud. Their parents come and the last day, and they are all holding up their quilts, showing them off. They get to go into the galleries, show their family, show their parents and their siblings about the quilts that they saw and learned about during the week. And then they get to keep this memento with them from their experience at Quilt Camp. So we get a lot of repeat kids coming back year after year, which is exciting for us. We also get a lot of new faces, and that's also exciting because it's allowing us to introduce art and quilting into new families and new spaces and give them a chance to experiment in a way that maybe they haven't ever done before. So I'm very much looking forward to Quilt Camp this summer, and we will be sharing pictures and photos of that process and of the kids making their projects as we go through. So stay tuned to the National Quilt Museum on social media later this month. Thanks.